Morning, everyone. Hi. Good morning. I just want to say welcome to both our in-person audience as well as our online audience. My name is Mimi Seifert-Weert. I am the Director for Digital Scholarship here in the library. And yes, so from the library side, welcome to all. So Open Access Week, International Open Access Week every year, gives us the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to open access here at Stellenbosch, and also an opportunity to critically look at new developments in the field. So in terms of the program today, just a few announcements. There will be time for questions, so please keep all of your questions until the end of the panel discussion. Questions for the online audience, questions can be asked in the live chat function after the panel. And then for our in-person people, please switch off your cell phones. The session is being recorded and will be made available on the Stellenbosch University Library's YouTube page after the event. We are still waiting for one of our panelists, but she is on her way. So we will start the session without her and just move her questions to a bit later in the program. Now, before I hand over to Dr. Siviwe Bangani, he is the Director for Research Services at Stellenbosch University Library, I just want to quickly thank the Digital Scholarship staff for all of their effort in arranging this session. So I would just like to thank Sungezo Mpikashi, who led the team, and then also Paulette Talliard, Simelelo Dingiswayo, Catherine Baikes, and Gabby Brandel. Siviwe, I'm going to go over to you and also thank you for agreeing to be our facilitator today.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Colleagues, starting from today until Saturday, which is the 29th of October 2023, is an International Open Access Week. International Open Access Week is a global event that began in 2007 as Open Access Day, meaning that it is now entering its 16th year. Open Access Week is an opportunity for open access advocates, as my colleague already explained, to engage communities, teach them about the potential benefits of open access, share what they've learned with colleagues, celebrate open access achievements, and to help inspire wider participation in helping to make open access a norm in scholarship and research. This week has grown exponentially and is now celebrated worldwide. For those of you who might not be familiar with open access, I just want to give you a little bit of definition. UNESCO refers to open access as ensuring free access to information, including scholarly information for everyone. So it's about permitting any user to read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link to full text of scholarly articles, or even crawl them for indexing, pass them as data to software, or use them for any other lawful purpose without financial, legal, or technical barriers other than those that are part of the internet itself. At SU, we fully support open access to scholarship. In 2010, we became the first African university to sign the Berlin Declaration on Open Access to Knowledge in the Sciences and Humanities. According to the then VC of SU, signing the declaration demonstrated Stellenbosch University's commitment to openly share in its research output with the rest of the world. Therefore, as part of celebrating the International Open Access Week and demonstrating our unwavering support or commitment to open access, the library has decided to hold this panel discussion involving three preeminent open access proponents and scholars. We do have three panelists. Ms. Ellen Tice, who is our senior director here, Dr. Lina Nyahotsa from UCT, she will come later, and Professor Loretta Jacobs. She is the chair of the Department of Information Science from UNISA. First of all, I must just declare up front to the gentleman here that the panel was not chosen by me. It was somebody else's idea to exclude men. First of all, I must thank all the three panelists for agreeing to be part of this conversation. With me here, I have 6 questions that I will ask the panelists to enlighten us on. Each panelist will be asked 2 questions. After each question, all the panelists will be free to join the dialogue as soon as the lead has given her response. Perhaps I will not read the full, maybe let me read them while we are still waiting for Dr. Lina Nyahotsa. Let me read the full biographies just to, not really the full, otherwise, yeah, not really the full, but what I have. I know your biographies, will be quite long. It will take this whole day, basically. So let me read the whole thing that has been given here, okay? Ms. Ellen Tice is the Senior Director, Library and Information Services at Stellenbosch University since 2006. She previously had the positions of the University Librarian at the University of Western Cape and Deputy University Librarian at WITS. She holds an MPhil in Science and Technology Studies from Stellenbosch University. She has played several leadership roles, as we know. She served as the president of the Library and Information Association of South Africa, as the first president, by the way, and also as the president of IFLA for 2009 through to 2011. She served in several boards, including the Subnet Online Board, and now she chairs the SANLIC Board, which is, I think it shows that she's a proponent and a leading light in terms of open access initiatives. And she's a recipient of several awards. I see this one that you got last week. Ms. Tice is not listed here. I'm not sure if I should talk about it or is it still... Okay. Yeah, only last week, colleagues, she received the Sally Trust Lifetime Achievement Award, which is, I would say, the most prestigious award for a librarian in South Africa. That's what she received last week in a conference of the Library and Information Association of South Africa. That was a very huge recognition for her. Maybe we can click. Thank you. Professor Jacobs is the chair of the Department of Information Science at UNISA. Her interests range from records management to ICT's information practices, as well as other areas. Her current research relates to transcending research paradigms to encompass an Afrocentric, pragmatic construct. You can see I cannot even read that. And exploring supervision models that are unique to the open distance e-learning environment. She has completed a Doctor of Literature and Philosophy in Information Science at the University of Johannesburg, and she has supervised quite, a lot of students, numerous, students, masters and PhD. So I'll just stop there in terms of your biography. Maybe we should start with the questions. So my first question would be a bit rhetorical, really. I would ask it from you, Ms. Tice, to say, looking at the theme of this Open Access Week, why do you think in advocating for open access we must prioritize public and academic interests as opposed to commercial interests?
So, good morning and thank you very much for the introduction, Saviwe. I will not be repeating the first part that I've said to also make up some time. So let me start by responding to the first question. You're quite right. I thought, well, I don't need 5 minutes to explain why we have to advocate for this, because that's the whole purpose of the open access movement and why it started about 21 years ago or so, with the Budapest Open Access Initiative. That was a very small meeting convened in Budapest by the Open Society Institute, and today, of course, they call the Open Society Foundation. The purpose of the meeting was to accelerate progress in the international effort to make research articles in all academic fields freely available on the internet. The participants represented many points of view, many academic disciplines, and many nations, and had experience with many of the ongoing initiatives that make up the open access movement. Followed the Budapest Open Access Statement was the Berlin Declaration on Open Access to Knowledge in the Sciences and Humanities in 2003, some 20 years ago, and that particularly was celebrated. 20 years of the Berlin Open Access Conference was celebrated this year in Berlin, and I was fortunate to attend that conference representing the South African Library and Information Consortium as well as Stellenbosch University. I was only one of 4 delegates. Only national delegation from Africa was from South Africa, and I was one of the 4 participants. And I will actually use some of the key points that came out of that to demonstrate why it is so important that we have to continue with this initiative. But before I do that, if we think why is it so important for us? And as I said, it is absolutely the reason why we have the open access initiatives and the open access movement. Number one, what initiated it is that many libraries around the world could no longer afford the exponential and consistent increasing of journal prices on how much we have to pay. Secondly, if you, from the global south or in developing countries in particularly, it was even worse than just the 8%, 10%, 12% increases a number of years ago that we had to pay annually when we consider also the exchange rate, and that we have to pay probably much more than what libraries have to pay in the global north countries because, of course, of our GDP, which is much lower, and for economic reasons. So we were faced with even much more challenges and just could not keep up with the prices of the increases in the journal subscriptions. So that was one of the major reasons that libraries say we can no longer afford to pay these subscriptions, and therefore our users, university, can't afford it, and we therefore do not have access to the material. So that was basically what really stirred this. And then secondly, was also, we had to look at where is the funding, and then we talked at the time about double dipping, because the funding to pay for these subscriptions, to pay for the research, to publish this material is, of course, funded by universities who receive funding from government's grants to do the research and publish then the results of that research. So already, you and I, as the taxpayers, have already paid. It is because research is paid for by public funding, some private funding as well, but usually that's also not open for everybody. So we already pay. So another reason, why should we make commercial companies richer, wealthier, to pay them? So first we pay to publish the research, then we have to now pay to access and read the research afterwards. So we talked about double dipping. We pay from the same journals over and over here. Even if a journal was published in 1900, we're still paying to read those journals. So they had long finished the work that they're doing. Plus, now, in terms of reading it, so if you want to access it, even though it was done in 1900, we still have to pay to access that same journal. So clearly, we cannot continue, and therefore we have to make research more accessible so that it can be more usable and that more people can build, and it is required in terms of the development of the country. And then, of course, what was good with the open access movement is that governments, research foundations, funding agencies, they all had started to also see this. But why are we giving you money? You go and pay it to a commercial publisher. You then have to pay for that, and now, of course, with the open access movement and article processing charges, now 3 times, now we also have to pay to publish the same material. So those are all the reasons why it is in the public interest that we have to do that. So I'll give you just some of the points that came out from the Berlin conference to say, again, why do we need, it's not just even in terms of advocating, but that we have to prioritize. Why do we have to do that? Firstly, it's around inclusivity in scholarly publishing. It is good for science and good for scholarship. If it's more open, more people can read it, more people can criticize it. If it's closed, not many people can read it, and it's not advancing us to go anywhere. And then, of course, it is the most scalable strategy to enable open access for readers and authors. It also means that we have to, and why we have to advocate is because we want to actually complete the transition to open science and open access. And then another point why we need to do this is also we need to establish a change in culture at all levels in re-establishing science as a public good. Then also we want to see this transition needs to advance at a far greater space. I just told you 2001, and already we're in 2023. And we feel in terms of progress that we've made very good progress, but not enough in terms of transitioning. And of course, the inequity that there is in commercial publishing. It marginalizes, it has a bias against developing countries, and it's part of the reason why we need to advocate, make it more public and open. And then, of course, also academic self-governance is an imperative in scholarly publication and publishing, and author choice and author rights must be fully enabled. And that is why it is so important for us. And I think this year's theme about the community and what is the other part of it versus commercial publishing is so important. It's about the community, the researchers taking back the control, because this commercial publishing land, they had basically taken control. We give them our research that we pay for ourselves. They then go and obviously have to do a lot of work. They then sell the intellectual property that has been paid for by public or private funding, and they themselves become more and more richer. So it's about time that we talk about the community and the community taking back control of academic and scholarly publishing.
Thank you. Wow. You really didn't need 5 minutes. Maybe you needed an hour just for a sermon to preach, the open access gospel. Let me not ask the other panelists to contribute. Welcome, Dr. Nyawadza. I'll just leave you a little bit so that you can settle in. Let's move on to Prof. Jacobs. So, Prof. Jacobs, in what ways do commercial interests in academic publishing affect the accessibility and affordability of research for the public and academic community?
Thank you very much. I think Ms. Thijs have actually answered my question. The biggest problem is that we pay for very high subscription rates. And every year those subscription rates are actually increasing. And our biggest worry from an academic point of view is if we think about how much we are actually paying for these databases with the journals where we have limited access versus how many students are using that, it becomes a bigger problem because we cannot really validate and motivate why we should, as a library fraternity, continue to pay these high fees if our students are actually not using it. Just to give you a couple of examples, I've got 1 or 2 students who's doing research on why students prefer to use Google versus the databases that libraries are offering. And actually, if you think about what you can get these days on Google Scholar and all the other open access information that's available, the question really becomes, why are we paying so much? So in terms of the commercial part, it is benefiting others and not necessarily ourselves. That also goes for the restriction to access. And for me, one of the key things that's very important is that if we think of the SDGs and we think of the Africa 2063 guidelines, what is it that we want? We want to see improvement. And the only way in which we're going to do that for our societies is to ensure that we have access to information. Now, if all this is part of a commercial endeavor and you have to pay for that, it also means that our societies, our communities are not getting access to that information. By implication, then also it hampers research and the ability for societies, communities to become part and involved in that research. One of the other things that we've also seen happening because of this high amount that we are paying for the commercialized journals is the increased number of predatory journals that has all of a sudden arisen, and literally sometimes you cannot determine or differentiate the one from the other one. So many of our, especially young academics, our young researchers are falling into that trap of thinking that they can get published quickly by paying a small fee or a fee which looks like a page fee, but in actual fact it's not, and then they get cited and they don't get any approval for the work that they have done. The other one, another problem for me that is really an issue is the fact that the industry is monopolizing what we can publish and how categories of information is grouped together. I don't know how many of you are actually looking at the list of accredited journals we have that's approved by the DHET. But every year you can see that they, especially for information science, they group us with all sorts of other journals, and it makes our ability and opportunity for publication much less. And that goes also now with the problem that we have that in academia, if you don't publish, you perish. And now that our citation indexes are also becoming an issue, it becomes a bigger problem because it's not just about you publishing somewhere, but also you being cited. Now, if you are publishing in a commercial journal which is closed and other people need to pay for that information, chances are that you are going to have less citations. And for all of the academics specifically that want to move on and up in the ranks, it is not just about how many articles you've published anymore. It's also about how many times you've been cited. So if you look at the commercial interest and the accessibility and affordability, I think the answer is very clear. It is not accessible for all of us. especially when you also move out of academia, if you're not a student anymore, a registered student, all of a sudden you don't have access to the library. If you're an academic and you decide to retire, all of a sudden you don't have access to the library. It doesn't mean that you can't publish anymore. It means that you're actually hampered in terms of what you can get access to. And therefore, we are reliant on our open access journals more and more to make sure that more people have access to information for various reasons, including for research and for development and growth. My 5 minutes done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Again, I will not give other panelists any opportunity to do a follow-up, in terms of the responses there. Unfortunately, we have limited time. And we still have quite a number of questions, and I would like the audience to also be involved in some way. Prof, both Prof. Jacobs and Ms. Tice, they did touch on the issue of open access and its contribution to development. I think Prof. Jacobs talked about its contribution to the SDGs and the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and also the inherent bias that is there, in terms of the publishers. When you want to publish, they look at the information, and if it's not relevant for the people in the North, they don't normally, accept such publications. But now, Dr. Nyaotsa, I think now you are settled in. You ready? Okay, thank you. So, your question would be, in the context of Africa and South Africa, where decolonization and denothenization of knowledge debates are raging, in what way do you think open access can contribute to inclusiveness and equality?
Thank you for the question. Good morning, everyone. I hope I'll do justice in the 5 minutes. So this question, I found it very packed when I saw it, and I wasn't sure what to focus on. But I just want to say before I start responding is, I want to put a disclaimer that open access is a great opportunity, especially for the marginalized communities, for at least their voices to be out there if there is an opportunity to open publish without paying. The cost is the barrier in most cases. But I thought it would make sense for us to talk about open access after conceptualizing decolonization and denothenization, because in most cases we talk about denothenization, and I try to look even to Google, this concept does not come up. So for me, I thought it was important for us to look at some definitions that look at northernization. Then when we understand northernization, we can be able to denothenize because we understand what is northernization. A few terms and scholarly works I looked at, they defined northernization. Douglas Anthony says, northernization is when racial underpinnings of imperial rule continue to dominate a country politically and economically. So if you look at South Africa, we no longer colonized physically, but we'll see the underpinnings of global North philosophies still protruding and still experienced in universities and in scholarly communication. And then northernizing is a process to imp with qualities of native to or associated with the residents of northern US. The northernization of the publishing landscape exacerbates current knowledge hierarchies. So there's a hierarchy because there's northernization, and northernization of the publishing landscape brings in various stereotypes whereby peer reviewers and editors have got geographical biases. And with northernization, there is a belief that anything that comes from global north is high quality, is great. Why? Because the global south is seen as the receiver or consumer of knowledge, because technology, money, civilization is in the global north. Therefore, anything, any philosophy, any culture that is North specific is emulated and considered as better than anything that comes from the South. Hence, it then makes any science that comes from the South be undermined. Why? Because we don't have proper labs. What can we do? Because also our knowledge is inferior. What can we do? We don't think. Colonial rule is the one that gave us a direction in terms of science. And I wanted to just look at denorthanization then as a process of trying to bring African philosophies in a forum where we can be able to say our curriculum is dominated with knowledge and science that is South specific. Hence, this involves also decolonization. Denorthanize is we're moving away philosophies that are Northern centric to bring Afrocentric philosophies, which includes also decolonizing. Because the aspect of colonizing is part of denorthanizing. Why am I saying that? Remember when I said what is denorthanization, I was talking about bringing cultures of the North. And remember, colonialism, the invasion itself, is the one that actually brought the perpetuation of Northern philosophies to us. So what is colonialism? I want to just take one definition from a student. Why am I saying that? It is important for South African universities to look at decolonization, especially after the fees must fall, roads must fall from 2015, because what the students are saying, it is a call to say the philosophies, the curriculum that we are focusing on is actually concentrated with Northern philosophies, Eurocentric philosophies, and there is no examples even in the curriculum that students from Africa identify with. Even if you look at publishing in terms of, say, economics, World Bank provides data, and they don't want data collected in Africa. And in most cases, some of our content is rejected because data has been collected from Africa, so it's undermined. So this student is saying, Buhle Hlawayo says decolonize refers to destroying or dismantling all structures and systems that perpetuate the erasure of indigenous cultures, knowledge, practices, and laws. And universities need to embrace African bodies of knowledge and their epistemologies, which means our pedagogies needs to be reoriented to look at Afrocentric content that speaks to the African child. As a result, we are saying if decolonization is looking at knowledge, then it also means it's inclusive of indigenous knowledge, inclusiveness of languages that are indigenous languages. Science cannot be complete when we are only using a northern language, which is English, which is dominating. Therefore, it means we can't practice citizen science and bring in African communities to communicate science that is Africa relevant. In this case, I'm looking at then how can open access contribute to inclusiveness and equality. If our papers are being rejected because they are full of Afrocentric philosophies, because people don't understand what we talk about in terms of African cultures, in terms of agriculture that is Africa specific, because we do have our own methods in every area. We do have our own methods in terms of lobola. We do have our own methods in terms of commercialization, even if it's barter trade in some areas, but it is what is happening, and it needs to sell through, to be seen that we do have specific science that is Africa specific. Therefore, if you look at open access itself, I want to just also put a disclaimer that inclusivity and equality is dependent on the accessibility of internet. Remember, open access speaks about accessibility of content online that is free with reuse rights. It's online. Therefore, the advantage of open access is that even if we are saying it's only online and we know that some people are marginalized in terms of internet, because they are open licensed, we can be able to download and share via email. No one can stop us to do that. Then we are bridging the divide of those that do not have internet. We can print for them because the license allows us to do that. We can be able to establish our own infrastructure and be able to publish science utilizing our own languages so that our communities, especially if you are looking at issues of data, climate data, how many of our agriculturalists in the rural areas who are practicing subsistence farming, who can be able to interact with data that we are sharing in that language using academic jargon, that can be able to utilize it and be able to improve their harvest. It's very difficult. So open access allows us an opportunity to translate, to publish our own knowledge. If we want to use language, there's no language barrier. We can be able to allow also colleagues from the global north to do peer review online, because the content is online. So if they want to critique our knowledge, it doesn't mean to say if we say we have our own infrastructure, we want science that is not authentic, or we want science that is rigor. It can be rigor, but utilizing our own languages. Therefore, utilizing African languages is not less, and also it can allow our communities to engage with science more and to create more knowledge. And also open access, as with availability of infrastructure, especially on the continent, we can be able to create prescribed books and publish them, and consider also students that have got disabilities. For instance, if you want to translate to audio, you cannot be stopped, because we're going to identify licenses that can be able to allow us to do that, have audios, have braille, and cater for those that have got disabilities, whereas publishing enclosed does not allow us the opportunity to do all that. So this opportunity with open access, as much as there are other barriers that I've acknowledged, they still allow us to be able to print for other communities without infringing with copyright. So I think it is a great opportunity to have diverse voices with open access once you have got infrastructure. And the great opportunity with open access is that there is open source software. So you establish a software, you customize it the way you want. It allows you to share with other institutions that might not have technical skills. So you share that infrastructure because it's open source. And I think open access is a great opportunity for both equality and also for inclusiveness, especially for communities with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nyawetsa. Of course, you touched on a number of issues. I will not reflect now because we don't have enough time. Perhaps I'll also, while asking this question, also open the floor. If you have any questions that you want to ask from our panelists, those online and the in-person audience, you can ask your questions. But let me just quickly ask this question as well, while you are still thinking of what questions to ask. So, having mentioned a number of things that I will not, mention again, maybe this question is to both Prof. Jacobs and Dr. Nyawetsa. So can you share with us some of the initiatives or just, examples that demonstrate efforts to prioritize community over commercialization in the open science space or open access space? And then I would like Ms. Tice to not talk to that question and speak on the issue of transformational agreements, because I think that's one of the key ways that we now support open access as South Africa. So anybody can start?
Thank you. Because I'm here, I don't want to be chased away. I'm going to start with Sun Journals. I think South Africa has...
Dr. Nyawetsa, I'll give you 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And
South Africa has done a tremendous job in establishing open journal systems, and I've seen that on Sun Journals. There are journals that are actually diamond open access, which can allow us to prioritize community over commercialization. I'm going to talk about the continental platform that UCT Libraries has established. So far, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Ghana, have come on board, and it is a great opportunity for communities that do not have infrastructure to prioritize community over commercialization. So there is no payment there. But if there's going to be payment, it's going to be minimal payment that we can afford in South Africa. And as a result, our communities and students coming from low-income communities from benefit from what we are publishing as universities in South Africa?
Thank you. I think what we have done in terms of promoting this and making this something that other people are aware of, or other communities are aware of. Most universities these days have open access journals. I think if you go and look on any catalogue of any of the academic libraries, you will see it there. But in addition to that, we also have repositories, which is open, where all the research that are done, whether it's with a student, whether it's my publications, we are required to upload there so that it can become accessible. And that for me is very important because that sets the scene, it sets the framework for us also then starting to work with other organizations, academic, public libraries, private institutions, to distribute this information so that it can be made widely accessible. Last week we had a School of Arts conference at the University of South Africa where we were talking about how to promote our African languages. And this is one of the most wonderful ways in which to do this, is in addition to having open access journals on African languages, but also to publish our African language information on our repositories so that it can be made accessible to our communities. And as she said, also then in areas where it is not accessible because of data limitations, distribute the information through organizations that's working in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to take 1 minute because I do want to respond to that question and give a practical example because I actually missed that in the first part, and then I'll just take 1 minute for 1.5 minutes for the transformative agreements. I think one of the reasons, as we've heard, that we need to prioritize the public and academic interests is obviously because of all the benefits that there are by publishing open access and making research openly available to anybody, anywhere where there is. And libraries, a practical example of how libraries had contributed to that was already 15, 20 years when we started to develop and implement our institutional repositories. So at the institutional level that we created these repositories so that all the universities research output in terms of thesis and dissertations and all the articles that they publish, even chapters in book, to make it accessible via our institutional repositories. And we know at Stellenbosch University, it had played a huge role in terms of how the university, in terms of the number of citations, because more people can now read that, and we believe that it had contributed also to the university's improvement on the rankings, the world rankings, whether we agree with it or not. But that is what really had pushed that up, because citations count for up to 30% in some of these world ranking lists. And therefore, and we know from the statistics of our repositories, we heard about Sun Journals, it is used from all over the world. And not just, in fact, America is probably the second largest country that access our research. Because a lot of this research, if was not available in our repositories, would probably never have been seen. It creates collaboration. Researchers become aware. Just imagine during COVID why they were able to find so quickly some of the solutions was because a lot of the research, especially in 2020, were made available immediately when it was published. So there's just such a huge benefits from doing this. And I just want to end with two other points that Dr. Bauer, the former CEO of USAF, had said, again coming back why we have to oppose as far as possible commercial publishers. We have to work with them, but they need to come to the party on our terms and not their terms. And two things that he had said: the dominance of the publishing houses has to change, and no one should profit from academic publishing. So researchers, institutions perpetuate that because we believe only if we publish in what is regarded as what do you call it again in terms of the high citation? No, not the ranking, in terms of the journals itself. Yes, the high impact journals, because they believe that is in terms of the quality of the journals. And we believe, and therefore academics think only that they have to publish in those, but then of course on the other hand, we have the problem of predatory journals, but it's about the education. So I know I've already taken more than the 2 minutes. So on the transformational agreements, this was one attempt, because what the publishers then realize is that they're going to lose out if we allow everybody to publish open access. So they then to introduce article processing charges, which means they can now charge us to read, and they want to charge us now to publish our articles. And it's not, again, who impacts this the most negatively? Again, the Global South, for the reasons that we've given earlier on. So by introducing that, they again force us in a particular model. And this model of we keep paying and paying and paying. So the community then came together and said, no, we can no longer continue with this, and we have to move towards a new model. A model that we can no longer have to pay for things that we've already paid, that we rather pay for only if we then publish, that we only pay for publishing and not for read access. And that is when they introduce what is called, we call it transformational in South Africa, transformative, it's the same thing, it's a little bit of semantics, but we want to emphasize it's transition, it's a transitional phase to this new model, where we in the future do not want to pay any more to read what we have paid for to publish, that we want to move to a system where we then, yes, we will use the same money, we will pay for the publishing. Everybody should immediately, once the manuscript article has been accepted for publishing, should then automatically be able to publish that free of charge. And there's different models on how you would pay for that. So for this transitional phase, they came up with this idea of talking about a transformative, and where in the beginning that we had combined now our subscriptions, what we pay, the libraries, what we pay for subscriptions to read, and combine that now with the publishing part of it, which means that we can get free publishing open access. So based on the number of articles that a country, the researchers in a particular country had published in the preceding year, you then, as part of the subscription fee, they say you can then publish for free. All your researchers that are part of this agreement can publish for free for the next, for the term of the agreement. In the case of SANLIC, we have now signed 11 such agreements, including some of the major publishers like Elsevier for Science Direct, Wiley, Emerald, Sage, and Springer Nature. We this year negotiating a license for Taylor and Francis, which is one of the probably the biggest publishers that South African researchers publish in. And the reason for that is because, of course, in the Taylor and Francis package includes South African titles. So we are negotiating currently with them. And this had led to where previously, first of all, it saves a lot of money in terms of APCs, because some of these APCs can cost up to $3,000 per article, around 52,000, 60,000 rand to pay for an article. So we, through these agreements, we have saved the country millions and millions of dollars to pay then extra to publish their articles free of charge. That's on the one hand, and we have now also opened around, or very close to, just from the publishers that we so far had signed. I think I do have the statistics here, but I know from where we previously published in closed or paid subscriptions, we have basically published about nearly 80 or 90% of what we publish in South Africa were published in closed or hybrid paid journals, and now with these agreements we've been able to shift that completely. So around 80% of what we now publish, we publish, can publish in open access journals free of charge, and again it opens up the research and make it much more visible for the whole country, and that we can participate internationally in this. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you so much, Ms. Tice. Dr. Nyahotsa and Prof. Jacobs, I should have warned you that home ground advantage will apply. In any case, it looks like we have run out of time. I'm not sure if we can extend it by 5 minutes. Is that fine? Okay. Thank you. Maybe let me open again the floor for questions. I don't want to be the one that is asking all the questions. Okay, at the back, Sangeza.
Okay, greetings to the panelists. Actually more interested in the one of transformative agreements. It's a two-in-one question to Ms. Tice. Firstly, in terms of the relationship that you previously had with the publishers, after the transformative agreement, how was it? Was it in a way that, or let me put it this way, how robust were those discussions in terms of getting the positive feedback from the publishers, as well as the relationship after, in terms of going forward? How was it? Thank you.
Maybe you can also touch on the ones that are going on now in terms of the negotiations.
But I think I can probably answer that question offline. I'd like to ask us questions to our two guests. So I'm just going to say two things about that. In terms of the relationship with the publishers, part of the negotiations included that we had worked on principles. We had about 17 principles. So before we engaged with these negotiations, we said, these are the 17 principles that we want you to consider. And one of our top ones was social justice. And that was not negotiable for us. Of course, they all said, yes, they agree with that. But then when we spell it out, what do we mean by that? Some of that was development program. We do not just want them to give us, make it possible for us to publish free of charge. We also, because there's a high rejection of South African authors, Global South authors. We heard about the biases earlier on. So part of our negotiations, and some of them had come to the party and said, let's work with you. We can customize the program so that we have authored, why are so many journals rejected from South Africa? So they had, were working with us to come up with development programs. So some of those relationships has actually improved. But the other part of your question that you didn't ask, but I will answer, is actually the problem. However, we have all of this opportunity, but the uptake So it's more how did the researchers and the authors responded to this. And what we can see from the uptake is that it is dismal. And it's one thing signing these agreements, but it's another thing in terms of the uptake. And we have to work very much hard on that. So we are monitoring it. We want to increase the OA uptake, assisting authors to optimize the benefits in terms of understanding the system, finding the right journal, protecting copyright, workflow improvements, authorizing OA entitlements, empowering library help desk dealing with missed OA. So much so at Stellenbosch University, we have actually now established a new position in terms of scholarly communication, and that can actually work. Also, we have a new position also in terms of marketing and communication. So one of the main things that we want to do is to do a lot of work. Of course, the faculty librarians help us, but that's the problem, is not so much now the publishers. We had worked hard to get these agreements better than some of the agreements that they had in other countries. However, the uptake seems to be very slow, and we suspect what some of the reasons are for that. But unfortunately, we would need to do more work. But I think people mistrust. They think it's predatory journals. They don't understand that this is, some of these open access journals are probably in the top percentile of the high impact journals, and they probably think, because if they don't pay for it, maybe, like people think if you don't pay, if something is not very expensive, then it's probably not that good. But in this case, it's not the case.
Thank you, Ms. Tice. Is there any question online? Maybe for the two other panelists, any other questions, colleagues? Okay, if no questions, let me ask my final question.
I just comment.
I just
want to comment.
Go ahead.
I just want to comment and add on what Ellen has just said now. I think the problem that we are facing in our institutions in terms of transformative agreements, as librarians, we are not embracing the opportunity to sell the idea to our academics, because theoretically it's out there. There is actually papers written, what SANLEC is doing, and as librarians we are being trained by different publishers. But we need also to take an initiative and be proactive as we support our researchers in terms of maybe bibliometrics. You look at their CVs and see what they are constantly publishing and identify which of those that are under transformative agreements and sell the ideas to the researchers, not the other way around. If we wait, our researchers don't know anything on transformative agreements. It's written, it's out there, and us as librarians and our executive directors, they know that, but we need to identify and be proactive to market this to our own researchers.
Yeah, can I just add to that as well? I think every university this week has got programs for open access and making it available and informing our communities of that. The question is just how much of this has actually been marketed. It would be very interesting to know how many people that's online come from different disciplines than information science or the library's environment. Are we making an effort to take this to our communities? And if not, then we are almost the people that needs to be blamed for people not knowing, researchers not knowing that these open access journals exist and that they should be encouraged to publish there. So it is and it remains our responsibility to make sure that people are aware of this and that they are encouraged to use that. So the citations help and the profile. Personal librarians, subject librarians, you call them, we call them personal librarians, should know what the researchers are publishing in and what the researchers are researching about so that they can help and recommend. So it comes back to us. Thank you.
Yes.
So sorry, no, I have to go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Tice. I think we can release you. In any case, we don't have enough time. We run out of time. But it was very interesting, colleagues. You know, this discussion that we had. And I wished, I wish we had, enough time to actually follow up on these discussions, because there are a number of, issues that they touched on. The time was just the factor. I did one song as I think you had about 10 questions, and I said, do you know how long people can talk? And you can see now that we just needed 3 questions, and then the discussion will flow. But as we conclude, colleagues, let's just remind ourselves of the primary goal of Open Access Week, which is to promote unrestricted access to knowledge and research. It's about democratization of information, fostering of collaboration, as our panelists indicated. And we also had some insightful thoughts today from our panelists, from the importance of open access in disrupting profiteering from the researchers, by the publishing houses, to bridging knowledge gaps and ensuring that scholarly communication is accessible to all, irrespective of financial status. Now it's really time for all of us to, whether you're an academic, librarian, researcher, student, community member, to join hands to ensure that community needs and access is prioritized over commercial interests. After all, our Constitution bestows on us a right to access to information. You had, the panelists talking about issues of social justice and, the biases by, those that control the publishing process, basically, against research from the Global South, etc., etc. Finally, I would like to just thank our panelists once more for sharing their experiences, insights, perspectives, and thoughts on this very important topic. I must thank the organizers, Songezo, Mr. Songezo Mpikashe, and Ms. Mimi Seifer-Rith, for organizing a very successful event. Last but not least, I extend my sincere gratitude to the audience. Without your participation and engagement, definitely this event would have failed. So thank you all, and all the best.
Is that still on? Before you close completely, there are, for me, 2 major reasons why we have to push this open access. The first one relates to global reach. We are a country with so much to offer. We are a continent with so much to offer. Let us be the people that create the knowledge and not just the consumers of that. And secondly, for innovation purposes, there's so much we can do if we have the opportunity to publish and be heard. And I hope that those 2 things are, for me, the key reasons why we have to push for open access and motivate for that to maintain and to be strengthened. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. I was deliberately not giving you time to make final remarks. But now Professor Jacobs is forcing me to do it. Okay, it's fine, Dr. Nyaotse.
I really apologize for this. I just want to say, as a community, can we not just look at research outputs alone? Can we also take advantage of other open scholarship content out there, open data, open educational resources? If you go to OER Africa, there are a lot of databases that our community can benefit from. And there are a lot of data repositories besides our Figshare repositories in the Western Cape that our communities can benefit from. And there are also a lot of preprint repositories that can actually encourage literacy. Thank you.